Hey friends, welcome to the channel. I'm hoping in 10 years from now, when I say that this is the first Let's Design a Church graphic, that there are oohs and ahs about how terrible the camera quality is compared to now and the audio and the whatever. You know what? We're going to get started in spite of any of it. I want to share with you how I design and what my process is. I'm not claiming to be some expert or even that I'm a good designer. I just want to share what I do and how I do it because I've had people ask, man, I'd love to learn how to do this. So that's what this series is intended to be. So buckle up, get you a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you like to drink, and let's get started. Oh, and don't forget a snack. Let me say all the YouTube stuff. Subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment, even if it's an angry one. We still love you and Jesus still loves you. That's okay. Leave me a comment, subscribe, and hit the little, notification bell. And let's get started, you guys. I asked ChatGTP for some fictional sermon titles from, fictional clients for Church Design Club. And I think we're going to go with this one here. We've got The Waiting Room. The theme is delayed doesn't mean denied. Trusting God's timing, taken from the book of Habakkuk. And they're talking about a single chair in an empty space. We're going to go a little bit different direction here. When I visualized this when I first read it, my mind went to like a liminal space. So we're going to go with something similar to that. So here we are in Photoshop. We have our standard 16:9 canvas ready to go. And I went ahead and pulled this image from Unsplash. And this, I believe, is a waiting room from the COVID era. So it feels very liminal, very desolate looking, right? So we're gonna utilize this feeling of how lonely it can be to wait. And we're also going to use, potentially, and I am designing this on the fly. This is my first time through. So we're going to use this clock here, and we might overlay that as well. So what I like to do to start with is to sort of lay out all the different elements that I at least think I'm going to start with for the background, and I like to go ahead and get that situated before I move on to the text, and then we will work on our elements and overlays. It's very important for me to keep things organized and in groups. So I go ahead and group our first two layers here as our background. We'll just call that BG for background. And I'll create a couple of new layers so I can go ahead and make these into groups as well. We'll use this one for elements. And this one will be for overlays. And within the elements group, I'm going to create two more groups. This one will be for our text. And this one for our objects. Awesome. Okay, and pet peeve of mine, totally just messed that up as a matter of fact. Before I ever get started on a design, and as you can see, I forget pretty often, but it is standard practice for me to, let's go ahead and actually remove these for a moment. Let's actually make everything on this canvas live within a smart object. And the reason for that is once we're done with the design itself, I want to be able to apply a camera raw filter to the whole thing and add things like grain and a vignette and whatnot. So let's just go ahead and highlight all of these. And I have a hotkey set up for convert to smart object. I selected Command W. So that's what I'm going to use here. And when I'm creating a template, I like to name these, double click to edit. If I could type. There we go. So now that everything lives within a smart object, we're going to double click on it. And here's where we're going to make our design. So once again, I'm going to drag our imagery in here. Come on, you can do it. There we go. We'll play around with that a little bit. There we go. So do as I say, not as I do. Start with creating a smart object and then jump into it and then go ahead and create the organization of your file. That's going to make your life quite a bit easier. So we've got some background elements here, and I like this clock as well. So let's start by messing around with some blending modes for this clock and see what sort of effect we're going to go for here. Probably something in the overlay category. Let's go ahead and apply an overlay to that. And if I find this ends up feeling a little too on the nose, we might remove it. I'm not sure just yet. And an easy way that we can sort of fill in some of this space would just be to duplicate. So that would be Option on a Mac or Alt on a PC. While this layer is selected, hold that key and click and drag, and it's going to make a duplicate. And then Command or Control T for transform. And our little contextual taskbar here is going to give us a flip horizontal. So we can just do that, apply that transformation, and line it up with the other one. So now we've got an extension of that color. Not totally necessary, but that's an easy way to do that. So I'm liking that. We're going to go ahead and flatten these two into a single layer. So to do that, we're going to highlight both layers and Command or Control. E is the shortcut, I believe is default. I don't think I've changed that one, but that is to flatten. So now we've got one single image. I do see I've got a pixel off here. I'm going to undo that real quick. And line that up just so. That should be good. So we'll flatten it, and then we'll apply our overlay again. There we go. Off to a decent start. I'm liking that so far. Now, to add some color to this image, we can do a few things. We can add a gradient. We could use some of our assets. I've got a bunch of assets pre-saved here. We might try something like that as an overlay. But here in the background, see that these are not in the correct group. Move those down. Here in the background layer, let's start by trying a gradient out. So G is the shortcut for gradient and also the paint bucket. Quick tip for Photoshop. On the toolbar here, these each have a hotkey associated, and then the sort of drop down with the additional tools you can access with Shift. So if I press G, it's going to go to the gradient tool, and I can keep pressing G, nothing's going to happen. If I hit Shift and G, it will cycle between. So it's going to change to my paint bucket and my gradient. Another one I really often use is the Move tool, which is V, and then Shift V is the Artboard tool. So all of those, once you familiarize yourself with the hotkeys, that is a handy tip that you can cycle between them. Let's go to the gradient, and we are going to see about, so when I think about the liminal space here in a waiting room in general, the first thing that comes to my mind is this, like, I think it's a bit more 90s. I'm not sure that they do it anymore in hospitals, but sort of that turquoise, teal vibe. So let's go for that. Let's see what this does for us. So we're going to create a new gradient, and let's make this a linear gradient. And we'll want the darker on the bottom and change our blending mode. See, I'm really, really liking that. So it gives us that nice, like, calming medical, whatever the psychology behind that is. That's pretty nice, though. I'm liking that quite a bit. Let's see what other options we have here. I'd like to think, as long as I've been doing design, that I can just sort of know immediately what blending mode I want to use. But honestly, sometimes it's just helpful to kind of cycle through them and see what effect you can get, even one that you weren't really thinking of. So that's why you'll see me a lot of times just kind of burn through this whole list. But I think we're going to end up right here. I like that hard light blending mode. That looks really nice. We might readjust this gradient a little bit. I actually like the clock being the bright point here. So we're going to signal a little bit that, hey, God's timing is not our timing. So maybe it's a little bit eternal and ethereal, and maybe it's a little spiritual. Okay, I like that. That's a good look. So let's just start there for a background. So we've got that squared away. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that down. And within our elements, let's start laying out our text. So let's pull up ChatGPT one more time for a reminder. So our title given is The Waiting Room. That seems great. I actually really want to go with a subtitle here. I think trusting God's timing works really well. So we're going to call it The Waiting Room, and then as a subtitle, we're going to use trusting God's timing. Now this part, man, this part takes a while for me. I'm a bit of a perfectionist on this stuff. So when it comes to finding the right typeface, it can really take me a while. And the way this is likely going to work, I'm thinking, would be to have waiting in a large, a large format, and then sort of like the to the top left and room to the bottom right. So let's see what that looks like. So we're actually just going to start with waiting, and I think we're going to go use all caps. I think we're going to go with something a little more traditional here. Let's see what options we have. We can go with a serif typeface, which is the typeface with the little slabs on the ends of some of the letters. Sans serif seems to feel a little more modern. The imagery we've got going on here, I think it's going to lend itself a little bit more to a serif typeface. So let's see what options we have. Minnow is actually a really great typeface that I use often. Let's see. It's really not bad. It's really not bad. Let's play with this for a second. So when you're designing within a type hierarchy, a font hierarchy, what you want to do, if you can, and it's not a hard and fast rule, you can break rules. That's part of design. You get to break rules. But a really good rule to go by is by using the golden ratio, we can create fonts that feel weighted properly. So our largest font is going to be the word waiting here. So what I've done is holding Alt or Option. I just duplicated that by holding down that key and clicking and dragging. And then I'm going to come over here to our font size, and I'm going to click right on the keyboard, and I'm just going to use slash to divide. You can actually use math in Photoshop within these number fields. And the golden ratio is, and write it down because you need to know it, is 1.618. So you can divide by that number, or if you're trying to make something larger by the golden ratio, you would do the asterisk and then 1.618. So what we'll do is we will divide that, makes it a bit smaller, and we might even divide it one more time. But once we divide by the golden ratio, it's also a really good idea to decrease the font weight, one or even two steps down. So we're on black. Let's see what it looks like when we go to bold. Looks really nice. I think this is still a bit large. So what we're going to do is divide it again by 1.618. Beautiful. And we will change that to the, of course. And now that I've got that ready, I can hold down Alt or Option, click and drag to do, oh, hold on, didn't do that right. With the layer selected, hold down Alt or Option, click and drag, and now I've duplicated that text as well. And we will put the word room here. Now, since this is a serif typeface and it has that very old school Google G swoop here at the bottom, it would feel a bit odd and unbalanced to have the word room down here. So I'm actually going to tuck it right under the word here. Sometimes the snap function in Photoshop can be a bit frustrating. So this is one of those times where, hey, we might break the rule because This feels way too tight, but I like it to line up properly at the bottom. So let's go ahead and position our text. Man, this looks really nice already. But since I want to make this a bit smaller, I want these two to match. So I'm actually going to hold Command for Mac or Control on a PC. And while holding that, I'll click on this layer as well. So we've got the and room selected. And then Command or Control T for transform. And now I'm just going to shrink both of them slightly. And we'll have to adjust the location of them. But I'm going to make room work for what I'm trying to do here. And then we'll move the word the up a bit. So we're going to go with a little bit of symmetry and line the R up with the slab of the I here. And rather than it being straight across in line with the bottom of this G, it's a bit of an optical effect. That is technically accurate, but your eye actually sees this upward momentum of the G as the new base. So you actually want this to live a little bit higher just for an optical effect. It's not technically accurate, but looks a bit better. Now we're going to take the word the and line that up as well. That is looking really great. I'm liking that quite a bit. And for this text, I do have the kerning set to a -40. I'll show you the difference here. If you have the kerning set to 0, this is the way the font is designed, it's fine. But by changing the kerning a bit, it can really have a nice effect and make the typeface almost feel like a completely different and new typeface. So I like to shrink that down a bit, make it feel a little tighter, and that way it feels a little more custom. Cool. So I'm liking the location of this, and the handy thing about organizing everything into groups properly is now I can just highlight the text group, Command T, and I can transform this however I want. I can also, if I hit Command or Control A, that is for all, and that's going to select our entire canvas here. And with the Move tool selected, the shortcut being V, and text selected, which is our group, I can use the alignment options up here. So this is going to align us, that'd be align vertically, center, yeah, that's right. And then if we wanted to center it, we could do that here as well. I don't want to do that. I like using this negative space over here. So we're going to use that. Now then, let's move this over just a touch. That did not work. Okay. So normally we'd be good to go and we could collapse text. I'm actually going to create another subgroup, and this is going to be our title text, and we'll have a separate group for our subtitle. So with everything selected here, and I just did that by clicking the first one, holding down Shift, and clicking the last one that I wanted to select, Command or Control G for group, and we can just double click on that and rename it. Call out our title, and go ahead and create us another layer there. And what I will do is we will take room here, duplicate that, and we can close down the title. There we go. And we'll change this a bit as well. So was it trusting? I believe it was trusting God's timing. Yeah, trusting God's timing. So that's what we're going to use here. Trusting God's timing. Now it's feeling a little bit one note and cluttered now that we have so much of the Minnow banner typeface here. So let's go ahead and swap some stuff out. Now it might be a decent idea here to use a sans serif font, since it's an accent and not the focus. It might actually serve us well. So one that I really love, one of my favorite fonts, is Tenon. So what we'll do is, I think in this case, we're going to go all caps here because it's going to be quite a bit smaller. And the all caps will draw some attention to it, but we don't want it to overpower the rest of the design. So I highly recommend when you're typing like a title like this to go ahead and I believe this is called sentence capitalization. I forget the correct terminology, but where the first letter of each word is capitalized in a title. Go ahead and type it like that so you have the flexibility to change it back and forth. Because in Photoshop, you have these handy options right here, and you can actually just click the all caps button here and convert that to all caps. And then if you disable it, it goes back to the way you typed it. So that way, if you end up wanting to, use a handwritten font or something like that, you have the ability to go back and do that without, if you typed it with caps lock, that would not work. So we're going to go ahead and do all caps here. Let's increase the weight of our tenon font. Let's go with, maybe we'll go with medium. And in this case, we are going to decrease this quite a bit. So we'll use our golden ratio again, divided by 1.618. And let's do that one more time. Yeah, that's really nice. What happens if we increase our weight again? And we might even go with an italics here. So this is a case where, I mean, this works, but it does feel just a little cluttered. So we might even remove it from the title and have it as a separate line item here at the bottom, which gives us the ability to move this up a bit. Now, I'm okay with this, but one thing I don't care for is with it vertically centered, we have this interaction with the clock, and it feels very nice, feels very well-rounded. No pun intended. But up here, this breathing room feels a little better. So my options here are I can remove the subtitle, or we can play around with it some more and change it. That's fine. Um, in this case, though, with this design, I really think the subtitle is needed for context. So we are going to keep it, but I just can't get away from this. I think that is the way to go with the title itself. I do want to go over here to our background again and move the waiting room itself up just a little bit. Let's see how much we have to play with here. Maybe we will increase the size of it. But what I want to avoid is this chair coming over into this clock space here. Okay, cool. And one other thing I'm noticing is this door feels a little distracting within this clock. So I'm going to go over here to our background layer itself, the chairs, and we're going to add a layer mask. That's this button here. And once we have that layer mask selected, I'm going to hit B for brush. And within a layer mask, anything you paint black on the layer mask makes that portion of the image not visible. And anything you paint white is visible. So for instance, this is an all white layer mask you can see right here. So if I go to our paint bucket tool and I have black selected as our primary color, and on our layer mask, I fill it with black, you'll see that everything disappears. Black means invisible, white is visible. And the same is true if I change to white and paint again, everything is visible. Which also, a side note and tip for you, if you press the X key, it's going to keep swapping between your primary and secondary colors. So when you're working with layer masks, that's really, really handy. So our whole point in doing that was I want to get our brush, and we're going to take the hardness down, and we will even take our flow down to about 2%. It's going to make it like a really subtle brush, and we're going to paint with black on our layer mask. So that's going to make this door start to fade away. That's what we want right there, because I want this clock to be a little more prominent here. That's looking really nice. And even like this baseboard of the room is kind of encroaching on that clock a little more than I really want it to. Yeah, that's feeling really good. Okay, cool. So you can see here, if I disable the layer mask and everything is white again, essentially, then everything's visible. But then this portion right here that is painted black disappears. So that's looking really cool. Okay. That was a side note, side trail. Now we're back to our title and subtitle. So, like I said, there's a few options here. So with Tenon, I don't particularly like the default kerning of this font. It feels way too wide to me, but I'm wondering if maybe we don't go all caps. And we might even decrease the weight some more. What if we go with... Yeah, I'm not liking the italics either. There's a few ways we could do this. As sort of a side note like this in a corner, or it could be nested right underneath the title. To me, this feels too cluttered. And the way that we've structured this, if it goes here, then it's red before the rest of the title. So that feels a little odd as well. So I think what I am going to land on is putting it down here in this corner. And we will go ahead and resize our title and bring that in line with our subtitle here. That's nice. Okay, so now we've got our text in place. I go ahead and create these objects groups as a fallback if that's what I want to do. In this case, I think we've got a lot going on with the chairs and the clock. So I think we're going to move straight to the overlays group. So within here, I'm going to open up my Finder and use some of the assets I have saved. One thing I really like to start with, on most designs, I'm going to add a dust texture. And I don't want it to look like this necessarily, but the dust serves so well to add texture. So I'm going to put our blending mode on overlay, and then I'm going to decrease our opacity until it feels subtle but present. 25 looks pretty good. Go down to about 20. Yeah, that's good. And let's go back over here to our assets again. And I really like the vintage blurs, and I really like the vintage light leaks. That is not what I meant to click. There we go. Let's see what this does for us. These do sometimes have quite a drastic effect because of the different color that we're introducing. But let's see what this looks like. See, it's got some of the turquoise that we are going for. So I wonder how this will feel. So we'll just go ahead and cover the entire canvas. And once again, the magic of blending modes, we are going to play around with this a little bit. See, like that feels really nice right there as well. Yeah, let's stick with the soft light. That feels really nice. And let's also add, let's go with some scratches. So this is where it's sort of like, this is where the creativity really comes in of, hey, what feels right for this particular design. I like to vary what I use. I don't want to just reuse every, the same assets on every single design. And I'm constantly trying to find new assets and create new assets. You can do some custom stuff with brushes as well. So I like to vary what I'm using, but some of these basics like the dust and the scratches can really be helpful to add that texture that I'm looking for. So we'll go over here to the screen mode. Looks pretty good. Oops, I didn't mean to click that. The color dodge blending mode is really adding in some nice texture with the black of that image of the scratches. Yeah, I think that's where we're going to land, is on the color dodge. And we will bring the opacity down on that as well. So if I disable our overlays, you can see there's quite a difference there, right? And all we've done is add a few pre-saved assets. We're not spending hours doing this. We're just adding the texture, right? So I think we're good here. I could keep playing around with this and add new things and whatnot, but for the sake of this video, let's go ahead and call this essentially done. One thing I am noticing is that the text feels a little flat, and that's totally fine depending on the design you're going for. In this case, let me add a subtle drop shadow behind it. The easiest way to do a drop shadow that essentially disappears and you don't see it, but without it being there, you would notice. When you add your drop shadow, go ahead and set your distance to 0, and we'll take the opacity down quite a bit as well. Distance to 0, spread to 0, everything's at 0, right? And the only thing that you're going to affect is the size. And we'll make that pretty large, and that's going to create a nice soft, subtle shadow behind it. That, like I said, just looking at the image, you don't see, oh, there's a drop shadow present. But if I disable it, there's definitely a drop shadow present. So that's a really helpful way to separate text from a background without it looking like you just slapped a drop shadow on it, right? And you can darken that effect by increasing the opacity. And at some point, it does start to look like, oh, there's a shadow behind there. So you kind of have to find a happy medium where it feels subtle, but also is helpful. So for this particular use case, we're going to go for about 35%. That feels nice. And I know I said we were done with it, but man, this subtitle is just, it's not feeling right to me. So let's go ahead and bring the size back up a little bit. So like I said earlier, we can use the asterisk dot or 1.6 point, no, 1.618. That's what I'm trying to say. So the asterisk is a multiplication rather than division. And that's going to bring that up a little bit. And in that case, we will definitely decrease the weight of that font. And that feels pretty good there as well. What if we just center it under there? That feels pretty nice too. And the more that we add things to the bottom of this design, the more heavy it feels. And it just feels like the text is begging to go up. Like it doesn't feel like the design is weighted too much on the bottom, if that makes sense. So I'm going to take our entire text group and we're just going to raise that up. And I'll tell you what we might do is we might just raise the clock up as well, though that will affect our mask. So if I were to move this clock, in this case, it's fine. It's not really affecting it too much. If there was a problem, what we could do is we could apply the mask. We could just click and drag it and apply it to the clock temporarily, and then move the clock where we would like. And then now that the same portion of the clock is painted out, essentially, we could then reapply it to our base layer. But in this case, it's not necessary. It worked just fine as it is. So we're going to bring this up to the waiting room. I'm actually going to make the clock a little bigger. Okay, guys, no matter what I do, I can't make it work the way I want it. I don't like it. I think I'm going to have to get rid of the subtitle. I think the subtitle is needed here, and I could keep messing around with it and try to land somewhere I'd like. In this case, though, I want to just move on to the camera raw filter and show you how that works. So as much as it pains me, in this case, let's just go ahead and remove the subtitle, and we're just going to call it The Waiting Room. This is a fictional sermon, guys. Nobody's missing out on this sermon because it doesn't exist. So, all right. Now we've got our overlays in place. We've got our elements in place. And our background is in place. So We are within a smart object, so we need to save. That's Command or Control S. And now that that's saved, we go back over to our original canvas and it looks exactly the same. Woo. We want to apply a camera raw filter. I've created a hotkey. I highly recommend that. Mine is set to Shift Command A. Obviously, you can select whatever you'd like. But to do that manually, up here in the toolbar where it says filter, you're going to go down here to camera raw filter. And there's my hotkey, like I said, Shift Command A. So we're going to apply a camera raw filter. And this is magic. I love that Photoshop has this built in. I'm also a photographer, so I'm used to editing photos. And this as sort of the final piece to make a good design really great. I love this step. It's magical to me. So I always start with our effects panel right here. And what I want to do on almost all designs calls for a little bit of grain. I don't want it to feel like an old photo necessarily, but I want it to feel texture. I want some grit so that it doesn't feel flat. That's really what I'm going for more than anything. So I'm going to add some grain, and I like to add a vignette as well. It varies, design by design, but most designs end up with a slight vignette. Once again, it just makes it feel a little bit more varied, and it's going to draw attention to the center. So that's what I usually add in the effects panel. Then I'll move down to our curves adjustment. Now I'm skipping past light and color because I only adjust those if I feel like it needs it after I'm done with the other steps. It's not exactly how you would edit a photo, but that's how I like to edit these designs. But in our curves layer, this is where we're going to make it feel a little more like a film look. And this is optional. I guess this is sort of my signature, is what I like to do. But what we'll do is we'll crush the blacks and bring them up a little bit to a charcoal gray, basically. So at the bottom end of our curves here, we're just going to take this bottom point and raise it up, and you can see how the blacks are being affected, right? And if we bring it over to the right in sort of the middle of this square, you're seeing that more of the image becomes dark. And then as we raise it up, those darks become gray, right? So you kind of have to find exactly where you think this design needs to go. For me, I think we're going to crush the blacks pretty hard here and land right about there. Feels pretty good. And then we can actually just check the adjustment by holding on the eye here. So that is the black or the dark point of the image. And then we can also crush the highlights as well. Now, since we're editing the final design in a camera raw, in a camera raw filter, that's going to affect the text as well since we've selected white text. So keep that in mind. And what's really nice is when you add grain and then you crush those highlights, white, like pure white, like our text, will actually start to show some of that grain. So that's why I usually like to do that if I've used white in the text of the image. So I'm going to take the high point here. Once again, same idea. I'm going to bring it down. You can actually see, if I zoom in a little bit here, let's see. 300%. Yeah. So you can see how it's affecting that. If I crush it, it becomes gray basically. So what we'll do is we'll bring it down a little bit, and then as we come over to the left, it's actually going to make the whites a bit brighter. So you can, once again, similar idea. You can find a happy medium where you're not removing the white look of the text, but you're adding in that little bit of texture, and it can feel really, really nice. And that, in this case, is going to affect our clock as well. So once again, if I click and remove and replace that effect, you can really see the effect it's having. I think it makes the clock a little bit too washed out. So this can be really helpful to just reference back and forth what you've done. I think the whites are too bright, so I'm going to bring them down. It's feeling pretty good. Awesome. That's our curves and our effects. Those are the two main things that I like to do. At this point, you can click OK and be done, or there's a few extra things you can do. Just for the sake of showing you, we'll do a few extra things. So we're going to go down here to color grading, and you can add specific colors into your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. Now, in a photo editing sense, what you're really trying to land on here is correct skin tone. In our case, we're just trying to add some cinematic look to it. Now we've already got a heavy turquoise feeling of this image. A classic Hollywood look would be like a teal and orange, which would be teal or turquoise in the shadows and somewhat in the midtones, and then the highlights would be orange. So we might go for something like that in this case. This image lends itself to it. So we're going to go over here to our shadows, and maybe we'll bring in some extra teal. And you can constantly keep checking what you've done, right? See, that feels really nice. It's bringing in some of that teal in the shadows. And then we'll go over here to our midtones, and you can kind of go either way here. You can either add teal in the midtones or you can add orange in the midtones. Whatever feels right for this specific image. In this case, I think we're too heavy on the teal. So let's see what happens when we go orange. So as you can see, I can't talk. We're removing some of the teal from the midtones and retaining it in the shadows. So we still have that teal going on, but it gives us a different look, right? And once again, we can keep checking back and forth what we've done. And you can start to see like the Hollywood influence here. You can see the teal and orange thing coming in. But where that's really going to shine is in the highlights. Now, you have to be careful when you're adjusting your highlights because once again, we've selected white text and we have this white clock as well. So any orange I add is going to start to tint the text as well. So like I said, this isn't exactly the same as editing a photo would be, but it is something you can play around with. So you can see here as I'm adding orange, well, I'll just go all the way and show you, right? All the white is being affected. So if I do add orange in the highlights here, it's going to be very subtle. I don't want to do too much. And let's check. So our original, well, it's not even our original, is it? But after our curves and effects, the image feels pretty cold, pretty sterile, which is appropriate for our, our context here is the waiting room. I mean, that makes sense. But this feels a little more cinematic. So I'm digging that. I'm liking that quite a bit. So that's an additional step you can take. And then, like I said, you can go up here to light and color and you can mess with this if you think it's necessary. I don't, but for the sake of argument, let's take a look. So we could increase our contrast, right? We might even bring the exposure down just a little bit and darken the whole thing. We can bring our shadows up. That's going to bring in quite a bit of detail that we were missing, but I actually like the sort of mystery, right? And I think that serves as a nice backdrop behind the text as well. We can make our blacks darker, lighter, and so on and so forth. This is pretty standard stuff, but you can edit it like a photo, which is really nice. And in this case, since we're going for a little bit more of a cinematic look, we might come in here to our vibrance and just this is like a minute adjustment, but we might decrease it just a little bit. You go too much and you're starting to feel like it's a kind of a black and white look. But if you come down just a little bit, maybe if we go to like -15, and let's check the difference there. So this sort of like prominent V, that's one of our light leaks, looks purple. It feels quite a bit less prominent with the vibrance turned down. So again, this is, I mean, there's a million combinations and ways you could do this. So this is just off the cuff how I'm seeing it right now. I might edit this completely differently tomorrow, right? But that's what we're going to go with. And we're going to click OK and apply that. And man, you can see quite a difference. If you want a full-size view within this, I guess you call this like the viewfinder, you can hit Command or Control 0, and that's going to fill the space. And what's nice about that is if you do that here and go back into your smart object, you can do the same. And then you can cycle through them and really see the difference. So that is quite different. So there it is, guys. What do you think? How would you have done it differently? I really like the way this one turned out, but hey, I'm just a guy and my opinion is not the only one that counts. I would love for you to leave in the comments what you need designed for your church. Give me like the title of your sermon you've got coming up, or whatever. If you have a design that you want to request, leave it in the comments and we might just do yours next. So leave that in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.